Hello, and welcome to another edition of Tech Tuesday presented by Delta Media Group, where absence makes the heart grow fonder. So, today we are going to take another look at the seller report system. Now, this is something that we've had in the DeltaNet for a while, and we kind of continue to make updates to it and add more functionality to it, so we wanted to cover it in another Tech Tuesday video. So to get there, what I'm going to do is go down to Listings, and then Active Listings, and then you can see on each of my active listings I have a Tools button. So we're going to click on Tools and scroll down here, and you can see there's an option. We didn't actually have to scroll down. You can see there's an option here for seller reports. Now in the case of this one, I have a report set up to go to the agent only already. If I had one set to go to the customer or set to go to both, it would say that in here, and I can set up more than one. If I didn't have any set, it would just say none set. So whatever's in here, I'm going to click on that, and that's going to take me over to the seller report system. So here we are. Now from here, I can click just send preview email to fire myself off a preview. What that would do is just fire off a quick preview of this particular seller report email and give me an idea of what it's going to look like based on what kind of functionality or in which sections I'm including, that sort of thing. So that is a quick way that I can get a look at it. Now to set up a new one, I'm going to go ahead and click on set up a report to a seller or set up a report to just you, the agent, so I can go either way, depending on what I want to do, obviously. So we'll click on set up a report to the seller. And you can see here in step one, it has me, just takes me through the different steps here and allows me to enter first name, last name. So we'll say, I'm feeling very creative today, seller report test. There we go. And we're going to click on next. The system is going to try to find any sellers in my customer database that match the email address I put in. You can see it didn't find any, so it lets me add it as a new seller. If it did find one, I'd be able to select it here and go on to the next step. And what it would do is add the seller report to that existing user instead of creating a new one. So we're going to go ahead and create a new one here. So I hit add seller. So there we go. And now it gives me a few options to determine how I want it to send, how often I want it to send, things like that. So at first we have send to. I can do seller with a copy to the agent, just the seller, or just the agent. So we'll just leave that on seller with a copy to the agent. So that way you get one and your seller gets one. It's setting send on Monday, but I can set that to whatever day of the week I want. By default, it's going to send out every week on whatever day is chosen here. And then for frequency, we have weekly. I can set that out to biweekly or monthly if I want. Next, I can set my initial send date. So if this listing just came in and I wanted to build up some data first, keep in mind these seller reports will show things like listing traffic stats and a variety of other information if you've added that other information to the listing. You can add notes to them, you can put showings into the DeltaNet, things like that, and have those show up in the seller reports. But if you wanted to build up some data before it sends the first one, you can go ahead and set this date out a little ways if you'd like. And then you would just click on Finish here if that's all you want to change. However, you have some additional options here under Override System Defaults that have some authority over what kind of comps go out in these reports, because they'll also display the comps if you have those turned on. So as we go down the line here, you see this is the price range that it's going to use based on the listing I selected, but I can override that if I want. And I can do the same for square feet, bedrooms and bathrooms, and all that sort of thing. And then I can also limit this down by property category, and then within my category, specific property types. So if, for example, I didn't want this to have a chance of including condos and townhouses as comps for a single family listing, I could just have single family selected. Likewise, if this was a condo, I could say only include, condos and townhouses as comps. So I have some additional options there. Next, I can break it down by the location even further if I wanted to. So location type, if I leave this as default, you can see what it's going to compare here when it finds its comparable listings. If I wanted to restrict to something very specific, though, I can do that. So I could say, zip code, and then put in my comparison zip code here. And you can see it does allow multiple there. So I have some options there as far as how I want it to determine what are comps on these seller reports. Now next, it can it can include and report sold listings as well. Now for that, you might not want particularly old sold listings, so you might not leave this on the default. Maybe you only want it to include listings that have sold in the last 60 days, because those will be more representative of the current market. You can put that limit here so that you only see those solds and not all solds. So again, once you have this set up the way you want, you're just going to click on Finish. It's going to spin the wheel there for a minute and create your new report. So you can see, in addition to the one that was already here, it has an additional report. Now, once I've created the reports, or if I have one in here already, you can see we have some options for whether the status is turned on or off. So like this one is turned off, but it's still in the system. So if I wanted to temporarily turn one off and be able to turn it back on later, I could. But you can see overall here, we have the option to edit customer info. So if I click on that, it's going to kind of shortcut me to a page where I can modify that customer info. And now if I go back here to that page, you can see under my Actions button, I have a few options here. So I can force to send this out now, which will immediately send the report out to whoever the recipients are set to be. Or I can send a preview of this specific report. So this up here is just a general preview with kind of all the options activated. But this report, maybe on this seller report, I've made some specifications for how I want it to define the comps. I've overridden some of the defaults. So if I want to send out a preview of this specific MarketWatch report, I would do so by going to Actions and then down here to Send Preview. And then you can see it has me put in an email address. It'll use mine by default, just whatever I have as my public address, or whatever your address is set as. But you can change this here to whatever you want, and then just hit Send Preview, and it'll send the preview out. Keep in mind it goes in through our mail queue, so it could take a little time to come through. It might not be instant, but you should get it pretty quickly. Next, I can go down here and click on History. Now, there's no history for this one, obviously, but if there were, it would show me when that's gone out, and it should also track click-throughs. So if we go to the history on this one, how many were sent, how many were opened, how many click-throughs there were, and down here, what address they went to, when they went out. So you can see all of the history for these to see if you're getting any engagement with the seller reports. Now next I can go down here and I can modify my seller report. Now that takes us back to the page we were just on. I can change my recipient here. I can change who it goes to if I wanted it to just go to me or just go to the seller, for example. And all the same options we just went over are available here if I wanted to change them. Also, this is where I would change the status to off if I wanted to turn it off temporarily and not get rid of it. The idea is if I get rid of it, I have no plans on ever turning it back on again. If I just change it to off, then I could reactivate it later if I wanted to. So we'll go ahead and just hit Finish again. So there we go, and you'll see that I just changed that one to off. And then our last option here is if I go to Actions, I can go down to Delete and Delete Report, and that gets rid of the report. So that is how I would go about setting up a seller report to send out, and some of the additional options we have there as far as previewing that report and controlling the kind of information that shows up on it. Now, to customize what shows up on the reports by default, I can go down here to Preferences and Email Messages. And now if I scroll down here to the bottom, the last option here is Seller Report Options. So I can click here to expand that, scroll down, and you can see we have some options for the kinds of things that are included on these. So by default, you'll be on Template 3, so we'll just take a look at that first. That is our newest Seller Report template. However, you can still send out the old ones if you wanted to. You would just select and then hit Update Traffic Report Template. But in addition to that, you can choose which sections will appear on all of these reports. So keep in mind this affects every report that goes out. So we have Enable Competing Listings, so if you wanted to turn comps on and off, if you wanted to turn pendings on and off, you have that option. If you wanted to, if you are getting sold data, so it requires that the system has sold data for you. But if you do have sold data, you can turn those on or off or decide whether or not that displays. The open houses section, how many web crawler views, you can choose whether you want those to be included. And then you can also tell it to include the lifetime listing stats. By default, it will only show them kind of recent listing stats. I want to say over the past few months. However, if you wanted to show, if this listing is, say, a luxury listing, for example, that's been on the market for a long time, you can show all those listing stats from the lifetime of the listing, and not just recent ones. So if you make any changes here, you would just hit Update Traffic Report, and that would update your template for those, or Update Traffic Report Template, to update your template for those, so that you can see this information or your customizations on every seller report that goes out on your behalf. So there you go. That is the seller report system. So as always, if you have any questions, concerns, comments, feel free to send an email into support@deltagroup.com or give us a call, and we will be happy to walk you through this or any other system in the DeltaNet. Thanks a lot.